An army was forming in Picardy in the summertime of 1916. It was an army such as had never been seen before. The war was approaching its second anniversary. The strength of Germany seemed to be unimpaired. Britain's allies, Russia and France, had borne the brunt of the struggle to wrest back from the Germans the advantages which they had won at the opening in 1914. By the end of 1915, France had lost 1,961,687 men, of whom over 1 million were killed or missing. And now, at Verdun, they were fighting the most ferocious battle yet, launched by the Germans with the set intention that France should bleed to death. It was time for Britain to put forth her strength. The army that was forming in Picardy expressed her absolute resolve to do that. From shattered Ypres in the north, from the flat lands round Loos and La Bassée, from the channel ports of debarkation, down the long roads of France, division by division, month by month, the British soldiers flowed forward, like iron filings drawn towards a magnet, the Somme. This was Britain's new army. This was the army with which the war would be fought and won. The old regulars had passed away in the dismal battles of 1915. Many of the first territorials had gone with them. The men of 1916 were the men who had responded to Lord Kitchener's famous appeal. King and country were not just abstractions. People believed in them. To join up was the thing to do. Those who didn't were shirkers. Women handed them white feathers in the streets. Anyway, all one's friends were going, one would feel out of it.
We saw that the Canadians were coming, the Australians were coming, the South Africans were coming. They were catching the first available boat to England before the war was over. If you went to the pictures, there you saw crowds of young men like I was then, drilling in Hyde Park. Or it might be crowding round the recruiting office. Or it might be, shall we say, a band playing Tipperary. The whole thing was exciting. And even the pulpits, although they started rather shakily at first, eventually they decided to come down on the side of the angels and blessed our little mission.
Above all, this was the effort of the British middle class, which had never considered that war was particularly its business until now. But suddenly the fever touched them all. No fear of privation, no obstacles stood in their way.
We went to the nearest recruiting office. None of us knew much about the army. And when we told them our age, the old recruiting sergeant looked very surprised, and he said, well, you look the type, you better walk around the park and come back and be 19 years of age. So we did, and back we went in the afternoon and signed the papers, and we were members of the British Army and given a shilling.
One idea, it started in Liverpool, caught on at once. PALS battalions, men of the same trade or profession, from the same district, city or street, men of the same class. They liked to stick together, to be among the faces they knew. Men of the North Eastern Railway Company formed a battalion. A well-known sportswoman, Mrs. Cunliffe Owen, telegraphed to Lord Kitchener,
Will you accept complete battalion of upper and middle class men, physically fit, able to shoot and to ride up to the age of 45?
The answer came back promptly.
Lord Kitchener gratefully accepts complete battalion.
This was the 23rd Sportsmen's Battalion of the Royal Fusiliers. When the Sheffield City Battalion first formed up on parade, their colonel told them,
"You're a crowd. A good-looking crowd, but a crowd."
It was, said an eyewitness, an unusual crowd.
Their ages ranged from 19 to 35. Standing there as privates were many men whom no other conceivable circumstances would have brought into the army. £500 a year businessmen, stockbrokers, engineers, chemists, metallurgical experts, university and public school men, medical students, journalists, schoolmasters, craftsmen, shop assistants, secretaries, and all sorts of clerks.
By the end of 1914, 1,186,337 men had joined the army. By September 1915, the figure was 2,257,521 men. 2.25 million volunteers.
Fall in A, fall in B, fall in every company.
Now they were in the army, and they set about learning to be soldiers.
Our training was done in the local parks, and for rifles we had broomsticks and whatnot. We went down on the trams from home, met at 9 o'clock, went home again for lunch, back again, practically the same as office hours. So our first part of the training, except as it included a lot of marching, which we weren't used to, was more or less something after the style of office workers.
They were more than half civilians at this stage, a citizen army in good truth. The manners of civil life clung upon them. A man who was reprimanded for not saluting the adjutant protested, "Why, I hardly know him." A handful of old soldiers and NCOs, survivors of Mons, South Africa, and forgotten fields of glory, put them through their paces.
Sergeant Snell did his bit, Corporal Quilter in tones. "Rest to the right, no other right! Keep those sections of 4! Pick those knees up, throw those chests out! Hold those heads up, stop that talking! Keep those chins in! Left, 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 right, left! You, Private Ball! It's you I've got me glad eye on!"
Halt on the left, from platoon! At the halt on the left, from platoon! If the odd numbers don't mark time 2 paces, how the hell can the rest form platoon? If he moves in the ranks, take his name. If he moves in the ranks, take his name. You can hear the sergeant major calling. If he moves in the ranks, take his name.
So far, we'd been individualists. So far, we'd been Mammy's pet or something like that. We had a will of our own, and it came rather hard to start with to obey commands. But gradually, we knew how to form 4s, right wheel, left wheel, halt, and all the rest of them. We became, in other words, a disciplined body of men.
They learned the rituals of another way of life. They had all the eagerness in the world to impel their learning.
Fixing bayonets is one of the most wonderful things in the army. The story goes that the sergeant major was telling the troops how to fix bayonets, and he said, "When I says fix, you don't fix. But when I says bayonets, you whips them out and whops them on."
The new armies learned their trade, despite every kind of difficulty, without discouragement. Not only uniforms were in short supply, but tents and huts and blankets and almost every single thing that a soldier needs. There were battalions dressed in uniforms of surplus postmen.